welcome back to the morning show here on Arise News. Joining us now from our Abuja studio to review top headline news that made this week is Dr. Adejoh Sunday, Lecturer of Political Science and Diplomacy at Veritas University, Abuja. Good morning, Dr. Sunday. Thank you for joining us.
Good morning. Thank you for having me.
So obviously, because of the work you do, I'd like to start with where you stand on the federal government versus ASUU divide. There's been, I'm sure you're aware, a lot of argument back and forth about the inclusion of academics like yourself in IPIS, the Integrated Payment System. The federal government would argue that it's to minimize waste, eliminate ghost workers, and for general efficiency. Whereas ASUU is arguing quite adamantly, too, that they do not want to become subservient in any way, and that they are independent, that universities' governing councils should be solely responsible for remuneration, because there's certain peculiarities in academia that mean that being under the IPIS system, like regular civil servants and MDAs, would sort of handicap the operations of universities. What are your thoughts on this?
Well, I must say that the fracas between the federal government and ASUU is not, it's not unusual. But we must understand the fact that the university system is not the same with the conventional civil service or the public service where the IPs, that's the integrated personnel payroll system, can work. The job of a lecturer is to ensure that knowledge is transmitted. And if you want to transmit knowledge, you cannot restrict the lecturer to a particular university. And so there are universities that have shortage in terms of personnel. And so the job of other lecturers within other universities is to ensure that they render services to other universities that are deficient as far as manpower is concerned. And so if you place the academia or the lecturers under the IP's platform, then it will become difficult to, to account for their remuneration. Why? If as a lecturer, for instance, in the University of Abuja, and I'm on the payroll of the federal government, and I decide to go and render services at the Federal University in Gusau, for instance, I need to be paid. But if you are under the IP system, what will show on the platform of the Accountant General or the Ministry of Finance will be that you are being double paid. In other words, you are working in 2 different places or 3 different places at the same time, which intrinsically that will not be the case. And so I think I concur with the position of ASUU that for the nature of their job and the relevance of the academics as far as Nigeria is concerned, ASUU should not be subjected to IPs.
Very, very well. Thank you so much for saying that. I guess the idea is that IPIS also needs to have some flexibilities to address the needs of ASUU if ASUU is going to be part of that. And with us actually taking into consideration some of these things that you've said. So there could be more of a future opportunity, maybe just not right now, which is probably where the conversation needs to go of what are your special needs that need to be accommodated. I want to talk to you sort of a little bit about something that actually we were going to talk to our earlier guest about, which is the comment that was made this week about importing doctors from Europe and the US to reduce medical tourism. I think the reaction from people and the criticism has been the reason, first of all, the idea of importing doctors from Europe and America, and the reason given, especially when people feel that there is a brain drain on the Nigerian doctors moving to other places. I'd like to get sort of your overall your comments on this, and also because Nigeria is educating doctors for the rest of the world. I mean, these doctors are everywhere else but Nigeria. And as someone in the university system, I'd also like to get your take on why Nigeria has become an education center for doctors around the world, but not in Nigeria, and why we now need to import doctors. Doctor?
Well, I think that's a very important issue. And I must say that it's unfortunate that such statement will be coming from the Minister of Health, that Nigeria needs to import experts to come and help as far as medicals is concerned. Nigeria has we're experiencing medical tourism for several reasons. I think what the minister should be more concerned about is to interrogate the reasons why medical doctors in Nigeria are leaving Nigeria. Why do we have the exodus of medical doctors out of Nigeria? These are the fundamental issues that we must interrogate. The state where we are now is not a state where we should be talking about importing doctors, but seeing how we can retain our doctors. As I speak to you, there are over 5,000 trained Nigerian doctors and nurses in the British Medical Health Service. And we're talking about importing doctors. Have you asked yourself about the state of our hospitals and medical facilities in Nigeria? These are important issues we must interrogate. What is the nature of our hospitals? What is the nature of general hospitals and hospitals owned by the federal government? You go to hospitals, you see obvious manifestation of underdevelopment. Our hospitals are not equipped. We don't have electricity in the hospitals. We don't have medical equipment in our hospitals. And I feel that this is what the minister should be concerned about. Equip our hospitals, make our hospitals world-class hospitals, not talking about importing doctors into a country where we have exodus of doctors. I think that is misnomer, and I think that statement, the minister needs to apologize to Nigerians for that type of a statement. If you look at the political class in Nigeria, why do they not get their medical services in Nigeria? Because they know that our hospitals are ill-equipped. And so why can't they equip our hospitals since they are in position, to decide who gets what, when, and how? Since they are in position to authoritatively allocate values. And so it still goes back to the issue of leadership, the issue of governance, and how well our leaders have, their citizens in mind. And if we have a leadership that is focused, I think we will not be where we are today. Everybody is going for medical tourism. The doctors themselves are leaving the country. The political class themselves are not convinced that they can get best medical services in Nigeria. It will shock you that some people will even travel overseas to go and treat ordinary headache or ordinary malaria, that we have what it takes to, to deal with. I think going from here, the Minister of Health needs, to emphasize and lay more emphasis on how to revitalize our medical institutions, our teaching hospitals. At what state are they? What is the state of facilities in our university hospitals? What are the state of our facilities and infrastructure in our general hospitals? What is the number of doctors that we have in our general hospitals in ratio to the population of Nigerians who need medical services on a daily basis? I tell you, sometimes if you go to our general hospitals, you may have to spend over 10 hours before you are attended to. And where there's a need for a test, you cannot conduct tests and get the result in 1 hour, in 2 hours, even for the whole day. You may have to come another day because we have gross shortage of personnel and we are deficient as far as medical equipment and facilities is concerned. And I think that is where the Minister of Health should be looking at.
Absolutely, Dr. Sunday. The notion that officials from the Ministry of Health are in touch with foreign embassies to bring in foreign doctors to work here is a misdiagnosis, I guess, that he's done. Why don't we import equipment when not doctors? Yeah. So I want to now tap into your expertise with regards to diplomacy and talk about the unfortunate continuance of xenophobic attacks against Nigeria. Last week in Mpalunga in South Africa, a few Nigerians were injured, anywhere between 3 and 5, depending on what paper you read, and one Nigerian shop was burnt down. 2 weeks ago, a gentleman called Ikenna was murdered, was stabbed to death for failing to fix a mobile phone to his customer's satisfaction. We have seen the diplomatic overtures that have been made between the Nigerian government and the South African government. What is your assessment of that, and what needs to happen to stop these attacks entirely?
Well, I think, you see, in the general balance in international politics is that it is better to jojo than to war. It's not every time that a government needs to be aggressive in her diplomatic relations. But be that as it may, I think the South African government is yet to do enough as far as xenophobic attack is concerned. I was in South Africa some years ago, and I was privileged to understand the social cultural setting of the South African people. But you see, xenophobic attack, especially judging from the recent one that has occurred, gives you a clear indication that a lot is yet to be done by the South African government. There is no country that can survive in isolation. There is no country that is a state of autarky. There is no country that is economically self-sufficient. We are in a world where you must have diffusion of people and of cultures. And so there is a need for a reorientation, genuine reorientation for the South African people to understand that they cannot live in isolation, and they should not assume that there are no South Africans in other parts of the world. And so the measure they give to foreigners in their country, it's likely to be the measures their citizens who are in other countries will get. But like I said, just like in countering insurgency, you need to de-radicalize people. Xenophobia itself is a psychological condition, and so if the South African government is serious about, purging the minds of South Africans and reorienting them, that there's a need for them to accommodate people from other countries, then there's a need to de-radicalize the South African people. There's a need to, change their mentality. There's a need to purge their minds and, open up their minds to accommodate people from other countries, because they cannot survive on their own. And so it doesn't make sense that fellow Africans are being killed, the businesses and firms and industries of fellow Africans, is being attacked by Africans. I think that does not support the idea of our heroes past. It does not support the idea of the African Union and the idea that Africa is a continent that must work and live together. A lot needs to be done, and the South African government needs to be seen to be working. There should be conferences, there should be seminars, people should go to the streets and reorient the South Africans that they cannot survive in isolation. And whatever they are doing, there are unintentional and unintended consequences of xenophobic attack. And the earlier this is addressed, the better for the continent.
I want to ask you a follow-up question on that. I mean, you're saying all the things that the South African government needs to do, but as we're watching as a global community, we're not seeing these things. Yeah. I mean, even they're justifying them, and the challenge we have is that the relationship is continuing to deteriorate, even though you have these leadership overtures. Why is it that you think that South Africa is not taking the actions that it needs to take to actually end these attacks? Because there are things that they need to do, but they continue to fail at making this a priority. And also the private sector, what is the responsibility of the South African private sector?
Well, the private sector has a role to play, but cannot take the position of the state, because it is the state that has, the necessary apparatus to ensure that this issue of xenophobia is addressed. The private sector, the civil societies can only come, through campaigns and advocacy, but they cannot do better than advocacy. But the state has all it takes to address this issue, and like I said, the state must be seen to be committed as far as addressing this issue is concerned. How many South Africans have been brought to book on the account of xenophobia? How many South Africans have we seen or read or watched that were sentenced to several years imprisonment, for this xenophobic attack? We have not seen all of these things, and that shows that the South African government is not treating this issue as with the degree of commitment that they need to. People should be brought to book. People should understand that we're in the global village and we're global citizens of the international system. And so if people are making their country unbearable for foreigners, they should be brought to book as a sign that the South African government...
Dr. Adejoh Sunday, thank you so much for that. We're going to go on a short break. When we come back, we're going to continue our conversations on the week that was and the news that made the headlines. Stay with us.
Welcome back to the morning show here on Arise News. We're still with Dr. Adejoh Sunday, lecturer of political science and diplomacy at Veritas University, Abuja. Dr. Sunday, thank you for staying with us. So we're still on the news headlines this past week. What are your thoughts on the debate that happened at the House of Representatives with regards to INEC deregistering or not having the power to deregister parties? You might recall Section 78 of the Electoral Act provides that INEC shall deregister parties that were either wrongly registered or failed to win any seats at the National or State House of Assembly. But now there's a huge debate about it. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I think the issue is very clear. How can an agency that is empowered to register political parties lack the power to deregister them? And so it is obvious that the powers to register political parties and the power to register political parties reside in INEC. But you see, the whole idea is that Nigeria is a democracy, and as a democratic state, there is need for multi-party system. Multi-party system is one critical characteristic of a democracy. But the kind of multi-party system we operate in Nigeria is laughable. And I think that is what necessitated, INEC's position to deregister about 85 political parties. We are beginning to have proliferations of political parties that lack the basic ingredients, the basic characteristics of political party. Nigeria as a country has over 90-something political parties, and if you go to the National Assembly, these political parties are not represented. They are unable to win even the seat of a councillor or the seat of a State House of Reps, let alone to talk about the Senate or the Federal House of Representatives, and of course, talking about the presidency. It shows that a lot of these registered political parties do not qualify, do not have what it takes, to be political party. But I understand the position of INEC because we must situate this whole discussion within the context of the political economy of elections and the political economy, of political parties. The government spends a lot of money accommodating these political parties that are impotent, if you like, political parties that don't have anything to offer. You need to take a look at the last ballot paper, and you see how long this paper was, because INEC was trying to accommodate as many political parties as we have, even though we know that many of these political parties cannot even win, a seat in as far as councillorship election is concerned. And I think it's a very, very important issue, and the National Assembly must and should, support this move by INEC, especially now that we're talking about cutting the cost of governance, now that we're talking about judicious utilization of the commonwealth of the Nigerian people. We have political parties that don't even have ideologies, political parties that do not have offices. They don't have national headquarters, neither do they have offices in the 774 local government areas in Nigeria. How comes? Do you now classify these as political parties? The answer is no. And so if they don't meet up with these basic characteristics, they should not exist, as political parties. And you see sometimes, when elections are drawing nearer, you will see 10, 20 political parties coming together to say, our party has decided to endorse the presidential candidate of the PDP or the presidential candidate of the APC. And that tells you how focusless these political parties are, and that they shouldn't even be in existence in the first instance. If I have a political party, we have an ideology, then there won't be need, supporting the candidate of another party that does not have the same ideology and principle that we have. If you want to support the PDP candidate, why not collapse and become member of the PDP? And let's know that we have 2 or 3 political parties that having this conglomeration of political parties that are not viable and they are not politically competent, to manage the country.
Thank you. It looks like this debate is something that needs to catch up with the reality on the ground, because at the end of the day, over 90 parties is unrealistic. And once again, those are some of the things that drive up the cost of our elections.
Absolutely.
I mean, a real issue and INEC does need to be empowered to make the right decision here. On a little bit of some positive news this week, we did get the headline that said World Bank ranks Nigeria 10th most improved economy especially in the area of ease of doing business. I would like to get your sense and sort of commending the departments that have been responsible for this, which is PUBEC. But also, I wanted to also just get your sense of how Nigeria embraces data from different sources, international sources, and when and how we accept data that suits us and when it doesn't suit us. I would like to get your opinion on that.
Okay, I think this is a very important discourse, and I think it's commendable to say that Nigeria is among the 10 most improved economy in the world as far as the ease of doing business is concerned. And you could see that the ruling political party has embraced that with all smiles and all of that, which is an indication that the current government is making frantic effort to ensure that we have a stable economy and, of course, that we experience economic growth and development in Nigeria. But like you said, I think the government must also ensure that they are not biased as far as this reportage is concerned. Government must accept data as evidence of critical assessment, of the performance of government, especially in relation to international political economy, and of course, as far as, the standard of living of Nigerians is concerned. We have seen in recent past that when you have data from reputable international organizations commending improvement in Nigeria, the government accepts that, and when such data is not good for the hearing of the political class and of the ruling government, they critically, criticize that, they condemn it with all intent, with all, energy at their disposal. But I think for a government that is focused, that should not be the posture and the body language of the government. Criticism is a very important instrument if government must improve. Criticism is a form of assessment and should give government an opportunity to evaluate itself. Recently, we heard that Nigeria is the headquarters of poverty in the world. And you could see the reaction of the political class, the action of the ruling party. But now we are hearing a report that Nigeria is among the 10th most improved economy, and the government is appreciating that. The government must learn to be open to receive criticism, whether from international organizations, whether from Nigerians, because these are feedback mechanisms that really helps the government to do a self-evaluation of our personality. But having said that, it is good to say that Nigeria is among the 10, most improved economy in the world. But as a political scientist, it is not good enough to say this country is rated among the 10 most improved. It is also good to look at the quality of life, the standard of living of the common and ordinary Nigerian. How has this improvement in the ease of doing business translated or translate into putting food on the table of somebody, creating job, creating an enabling environment for somebody who wants to start a business to do business? I think as Nigerians, sometimes we are also in position to tell whether or not there's an improvement in the ease of doing business or not. Here in Abuja, you see a lot of small-scale individuals who are trying to start up something, and I tell you all manner of tax forces, all manner of taxes levied on these people, all manner of things that discourages people from doing business. These are people that the failure of the state to provide basic amenities for them, the failure of the state to provide employment for them has driven them into trying to start small-scale business. But I tell you, the experience is not funny. You need to see what is happening in Abuja, how some traders, some hawkers are chased, are sometimes arrested, their goods sometimes confiscated by the Abuja Development Agency, and all manner of things. We should create an enabling environment to encourage people to start small, especially when the government knows that it is the responsibility of the government to provide for these people, and if you have failed to provide for them, then you should not kill the little that they are trying to do for themselves.
Thank you, Dr. Sunday. So we talked about the Minister of Health's comments during his budget defense. So let's move to the Minister for Works and Housing, Babatunde Fashola, and his bid for a 10 trillion naira infrastructure bond to address the massive infrastructure deficits that we have in Nigeria. What are your thoughts on that?
You see, infrastructure and housing is a critical issue in Nigeria. Housing is, or if you like, say shelter, is one basic need of every human being. And so if there's a proposal and that will translate into a concrete reality, I think that is fine and fair enough. But you see, the problem we have always had in Nigeria is not about budget. I see a lot of arguments, a lot of debates, a lot of defense going on in the past week on budget. That would not solve the issue. Yes, it is good to come and defend your budget so Nigerians will understand what you actually intend to do and how you intend to go about this. But after these bureaucracies of budget defense, can we translate this budget eventually into concrete reality? Yes, we have serious deficiency as far as housing is concerned. If this proposed amount of money is released, will it be translated into concrete reality? Another issue is if this amount of money is approved, will it be released? For the past 4 years, we have not had up to 60% implementation of our national budget. And so sometimes it looks like this whole process of budgeting is a jamboree or it's an academic exercise because of what use is it, spending all these times and resources, and at the end of the day, you cannot even implement 50 to 60% of the national budget, then it doesn't make sense. So it is good to make provision for housing, but how willing is the government to release this said amount? And if this said amount is released, how committed is the Minister of Works to also ensure that this amount of money is judiciously utilized? How committed is the minister to also ensuring that the quality of houses provided is good enough? If you want to see poor housing as far as Nigeria is concerned, go and check out estate built by government. They use poor infrastructure, they use poor roofing sheets, they use poor blocks, everything is poor. And so sometimes this alone serves as deterrent for Nigerians patronizing all this low-cost housing scheme and all of that. A lot needs to be done. We need to reassess ourselves. We need to have the interest of our country at heart. We need to put national interest before individual interests, and all these things is manifested in the whole process of getting contract, bidding for contract, and who gets
Dr.
what,
Sunday?
when, and how. It's a pathetic situation.
Thank you, Dr. Sunday. We do hope that if the money is raised, the 10 trillion in conjunction with the Debt Management Office, will be used judiciously. Thank you very much for joining us today.
Thank you.